Hello and welcome. With effect from 1st October 2022, several changes have been made to the GST law by notification issued by the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs, CBIC in short. In today's video, we are going to discuss 5 such key changes, starting with the extension of time limits for certain activities. Now, what are these activities? First, for availing input tax credit. Second, to issue credit notes. Third, to rectify errors in your GSTR 1, GSTR 3B or GSTR 8. Until these changes were effective, the time limit for all these activities was 30th September from the end of the financial year or 31st December following the end of the year, that is the due date to file your annual return, whichever is earlier. This 30th September time limit is now changed to 30th November from the end of the financial year. So that means you have got additional 2 months for all these activities. And these changes are going to be applicable even for financial year 2021-22. Say for example, if you have missed to avail input tax credit for any of your purchase transactions pertaining to financial year 2021-22, then you can avail ITC till 30th November. Similarly, if you have to issue credit notes to your customers, say for sales returns or any other reason, you can do it till 30th November. Then let's say you have noticed some errors in your GSTR 1 or GSTR 3B, GSTR 8 pertaining to financial year 2021-22, then you can rectify those errors till 30th November 2022. Let's now move to the second change, that is sequential filing of returns. That is the order in which you can file your GST returns. First, GSTR 1. You can't file your GSTR 1 for the current period until you have filed your GSTR 1 for the last period. Say for instance, if you are a monthly filer, then you can file your GSTR 1 for September 2022 only after you have filed your GSTR 1 for August 2022. Similarly, if you are a quarterly filer, that is if you have opted for quarterly returns with monthly payments scheme, that is QRMP, then you can file your GSTR 1 for second quarter only after you have filed your GSTR 1 for the first quarter. If you would like to know more about GSTR 1, GSTR 3B and QRMP scheme, then you may consider watching my earlier videos, the link in the top right corner. Second, GSTR 3B. You can't file your GSTR 3B for the current period unless you have filed your GSTR 1 for the current period. Say for instance, you can file your GSTR 3B for September 2022 only after you have filed your GSTR 1 for September 2022, that is for the same tax period. Now, the next change is pertaining to cancellation of GST registration. If you are a composition dealer, then you must be filing GSTR 4. So, if you have not filed your GSTR 4 beyond 3 months from the due date, that is last date to file your GSTR 4 is 30th April from the end of the financial year. So, if you don't file it beyond 3 months from this last date, that is if you don't file it within 31st July from the end of the financial year, then the proper officer can cancel your GST registration. Then for others, that is if you have not opted for composition scheme. If you don't file your GST returns for a continuous time period and this time period is going to be specified, that means as of now we don't know what is this continuous time period. It could be 2 months, 3 months or 6 months. So if you don't file your GST returns for continuous period, whatever that's going to be specified, then the proper officer can cancel your GST registration. Let's now move to the next change, which is related to the input tax credit. Until these changes were made effective, you can avail input tax credit if you satisfy 5 conditions. Let's see what are those. First, you should have tax invoice. Second, you should have received goods or services. Third, your supplier should have paid taxes. Fourth, you should be regular in filing your GST returns. And fifth, the transaction should appear in your GSTR 2B. Until 30th September 2022, if you had satisfied these 5 conditions, you were able to avail input tax credit provided it was not an ineligible ITC. If you would like to know more about ineligible ITC, you may consider watching my earlier video, the link in the top right corner. Now, with effect from 1st October 2022, apart from these 5 conditions, several other restrictions have been added when it comes to availing input tax credit. Let's see what are those. First, for newly registered taxpayers. The government is going to specify the time period for which newly registered taxpayers will not be able to avail input tax credit. This time limit is not yet specified. It's going to be specified shortly. This could be say 1 week or 1 month. So depending upon the time limit that is going to be specified, newly registered taxpayers will not be able to avail input tax credit. Second, if suppliers default in paying the tax and if this default continues for a specified time period. Again, the time period is not yet specified. So if your suppliers don't pay GST and if this default is going to continue for whatever time period that is going to be specified, then you will not be able to avail input tax credit whether or not you have paid your supplier. Third, the output tax credit that you have declared in your GSTR1 is more than the output tax that you have paid in your GSTR3B, and this difference is more than the limit that is going to be specified. Again, the limit is not yet specified. So if you exceed that limit, then you cannot avail input tax credit. Fourth, the input tax credit that you have availed is more than the ITC as per your GSTR2B, and this difference is more than the specified limit. Even in this situation, you will not be able to avail input tax credit. Fifth, the government is going to specify the proportion of output tax payment using e-credit ledger, that is electronic credit ledger. That is the input tax credit that you can utilize when you make payment on your output supplies. So if you exceed this proportion, again this proportion is not yet specified. If you exceed this whatever limit that is going to be specified, then you will not be able to avail input tax credit. So with effect from 1st October 2022, apart from satisfying those 5 conditions, you also need to check whether you fall in this restrictive category. Now last, others. Here the due date to file your GSTR5, GSTR5 is filed by non-resident taxpayers, is changed from the 20th of the subsequent month to 13th of the subsequent month. That is, the time limit is now reduced. Next, if you don't file your GSTR8 within the due date, GSTR8 is filed by e-commerce operators collecting tax at source, that is TCS. So if this GSTR8 is not filed within the due date, then you have to pay late fee of ₹100 per day. That's all I have for you in this video. Hope this was helpful. Thank you for watching.